Hi there guys, I hope you are having a good day. Now Carlos Takam has explained he still wants to fight some of Britain's top heavyweights despite missing out on a Tyson Fury in December of 2020. Obviously, Tyson Fury did want to come back to the UK to have a comeback fight and obviously to keep busy because he knew that he was going to be facing Anthony Joshua in likely June or July of 2021. So it's not ideal being out of the ring for over a year considering the last time he fought was on February 22nd, 2020. So that's a long time to be out of the ring. And Anthony Joshua did have a kind of interim fight, although it wasn't mandatory. So it was still a big fight. But that means that Anthony Joshua is going into undisputed as the more active fighter compared to Tyson Fury. Now, of course, Tyson Fury was likely going to be fighting Ajit Kabayel, not Carlos Takam. But leading up to that date, 5th of December, it seemed like perhaps Carlos Takam could get the fight, not necessarily Ajit Kabayel. So there was a possibility that Takam could have got that opportunity at the WBC World Champion, but that fell at the wayside, and now Carlos Takam is left looking for a fight against a top heavyweight. Obviously, he has a good reputation in the UK with fights against Derek Chisora, Anthony Joshua as well, so there is a good past for Carlos Takam in the UK, so if he can come back, then that would be welcome. But the question is, who can he fight? Who is out there that he can set his sights on? Dillian Whyte has a fight, Derek Chisora is likely going to be fighting Joseph Parker, and Anthony Joshua is about to go into undisputed with Tyson Fury, so who is out there that Carlos Takam can fight? Well, the thing is about Dillian Whyte's situation is he is fighting Alexander Povetkin in a rematch on the 27th of March this month. So is there a possibility that Dillian Whyte could fight Carlos Takam later in the year? Is that something that anyone would condone happening? Because the thing is with Dillian Whyte is he will get a world title opportunity next year, but he needs a fight in between that. Does he want to take an Andy Ruiz, a Deontay Wilder, and risk his position once again like he did in the first Povetkin fight? Then possibly miss out on a world title chance in 2022, because undisputed will happen this year twice, so therefore the belts will be tied up, but eventually mandatories will come, the WBA, the IBF once again, the WBC, which will be Dillian Whyte, provided he is able to beat Alexander Povetkin. So that is a big opportunity, and I've said it before, Dillian Whyte is giving some of his best performances to non-world title fights, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's great. But the thing is about those fights of fighting a top 10 contenders back to back is that puts miles on the clock, and that's something that Dillian Whyte doesn't want at this stage because he hasn't had that big title fight yet. And that's crazy considering he's 33, 34, and because of how long he's been in the game. It's not because of his age, because I mean Joe Joyce is just about to get his first world title opportunity and he's 36. It's not necessarily about that. It's about the fights he's had in the past, the miles on the clock. That will all count up when he gets in there with a top opponent. It always does. Those miles on the clock are something you cannot avoid, especially if you are in fights like Dillian Whyte has been in, like Joseph Parker, Oscar Rivas, those kind of fights, the Povetkin fight as well, the second Povetkin fight. There are some great fights in there on the resume of Dillian Whyte. So the question is, who does he fight in the interim before his world title opportunity? Does he risk it against Deontay Wilder? The question is, would Wilder even take that fight? Because of his situation and the fact that he hasn't even had a comeback fight yet and nothing is being planned it seems. Then there's Andy Ruiz, who I do believe Dillian Whyte would take, but at some point you have to question, where does it all end? When does he say, you know what, I want this world title opportunity, I'm finally going to do something for myself and decide that I'm going to wait and get my world title chance, I'm not going to risk it once again. As soon as that comes, then he needs to take a fight maybe like Carlos Takam. That is where Takam does come in. Perhaps if Carlos Takam does want to fight a British fighter, then if Dillian Whyte is able to beat Alexander Povetkin, maybe that is a possibility later on this year. Because put it this way, this is what I see happening. Dillian Whyte, if he is able to beat Alexander Povetkin, he says to Eddie Hearn, okay, get me Deontay Wilder or get me Andy Ruiz. Eddie Hearn is going to be inclined to do what Dillian Whyte asks, but his team around him are going to say, hang on a minute, we're WBC interim world champion, we just took a risk against Povetkin and it didn't come off, we had to take the rematch, luckily we got the victory. This is of course if Whyte is able to get that victory, but provided he does, then they're going to think, let's just wait, why would we risk it once again, like we did against Povetkin? He gets this world title opportunity if he stays on this course, as long as he stays active. Take kind of a tough fight in Carlos Takam because Takam is a good fighter, but he's not necessarily what he once was if you saw him in his last performance against Jerry Forrest. So there is this kind of a tough fight in Carlos Takam, but you would definitely say that Dillian Whyte is the heavy favourite going into that fight. Carlos Takam talking about fighting another British heavyweight. It's not going to be Tyson Fury. I don't see Carlos Takam ever fighting Tyson Fury now. His chance was in December and unfortunately that fell at the wayside. Anthony Joshua, he's already fought him. I don't see AJ looking for a Carlos Takam rematch unless he became mandatory. So those two are out. What about a rematch with Derek Chisora? That is definitely possible, although Chisora is fighting probably Joseph Parker on May 1st. So that counts him out. The only one left is Dillian Whyte, aside from the likes of Daniel Dubois and Joe Joyce. Joyce is fighting Usyk. Daniel Dubois is not going to go in there with someone like Carlos Takam coming off of a loss against Joe Joyce. So having said that, I do believe that there could be legs in a Dillian Whyte versus Carlos Takam fight. I mean, nothing has been confirmed. Carlos Takam has merely come out and explained that he wants to challenge at some of the top heavyweights in Britain, the likes of perhaps a Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua. Dillian Whyte must be in there as well, and perhaps a Derek Chisora, Joe Joyce also. There are some great heavyweights in the UK, but it seems at the moment the most plausible option would be Dillian Whyte, provided he is able to get the W against Alexander Povetkin, of course. Otherwise, there is no Takam versus Dillian Whyte. And I believe that there must be some point for Dillian Whyte where he realises that he does need to give his best to a world title opportunity, and that needs to be his focus. It's alright taking these big fights because the fans love him for doing that. It has done him no harm. I mean, I know he suffered a defeat to Alexander Povetkin, but ultimately if he hadn't taken those other tough fights, he would not be in this position. Dillian Whyte fights anyone. That has been the mould of his entire career, and that is why the fans get behind him continuously for each and every fight. But there does come a point where he has to decide whether he does actually want that world title opportunity, which I definitely believe he does. And I'm not saying that taking a Ruiz fight or a Wilder fight means that he cannot get there. He can beat those guys, but the thing is, it's more miles on the clock in a non-world title fight. Why not fight them after the world title fight if he is able to win? Because who knows, Dillian Whyte could be fighting in a vacant world title fight, because what about these belts? I mean, they're not going to stay with one champion after Undisputed. There are going to be mandatories and titles vacated, so there are going to be vacant world title fights for fighters like Dillian Whyte being in that number one position or WBC interim world champion. So if there is that possibility, then he has a great chance of winning a world title. He needs to be ready for that moment. And I mean, Carlos Takam isn't necessarily a tune-up fight, it's still a tough fight, but it is one we would expect Dillian Whyte to win, especially at this stage of Carlos Takam's career. That is a possibility for later in this year, but at the moment there is no conversations for Dillian Whyte versus Carlos Takam. This is just going off of what Carlos Takam has explained, his desire to get back in there with a top British heavyweights, and one of those names could be Dillian Whyte. And the reason why this works quite well is because that would be a great interim fight for Dillian Whyte later in the year to go into a big fight for the WBC World Championship. But Andy Ruiz, Deontay Wilder, those fights are much better, of course. I'm not sure whether Dillian Whyte should take them, but I do have a suspicion that he would take those fights. The question is, does Deontay Wilder want it? Does Andy Ruiz want it after having a comeback on April 24th? That is the big question. Guys, anyway, what are your thoughts on this? Make sure you leave your thoughts in the comments below, leave a thumbs up, and subscribe if you are new. Thanks guys.